You all know that the Pasha of the week is called Pashas Re'eh. We will talk about the things that in Pashas Re'eh, but the very first word immediately calls your attention and says, what's meant to Re'eh? How is it Re'eh? Re'eh means see. Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking to the Yid. He's not showing them, he's talking to them. How are they going to see? How are they going to see? And I want to discuss this a little bit because what we see has a tremendous effect and influence on us. The Torah says, we say it in davening every day in Shkri Yeshua, you should not seek to follow your hearts and your eyes, because the eyes have a tremendous influence, tremendous power. And Moshe Rabbeinu is telling the Eden that, you know something? What you see is not the real thing to see. And if you listen to me, you will see something different. Hey, you will see. This principle of sight, of seeing, we've discussed here several times in the past. And we pointed out that the power of sight and the reason that it is so influential on the person is that which a person sees becomes to him the basis for reality. This is the real thing. More even than what he touches, than what he tastes, and what he smells. Sight is more real to him than anything else. And he pointed out that we see this from the halacha. The halacha is that if somebody is blind, God forbid, he's potter for the mitzvahs. Why? Huh? Potter, he's absolved. He's exempt from mitzvahs. In a sense, potter, he's not somebody who's blind. Does not have the obligation for mitzvahs.
For any mitzvahs?
I mean, he can do mitzvahs, but he doesn't have the obligation. And the reason for that is, it's okay, can you translate? The reason for that is because by him the world is not real. He knows the world from somebody telling him, from touching it, from feeling it. It's not real. When he sees, then it becomes a reality. So, when we think about sight, it seems to us that what is in sight? It is the fact that I see this object, and when I see this object, this makes it real to me, because I see the object itself. But if it were only because I see the object, so then I can feel the object. I can touch it. And I always bring out the science following interesting point. It's interesting that a little child, when he looks at something interesting, what does he do? What is the first thing that he does? He brings it to his mouth. What is bringing it to his mouth? He's looking at it. The answer is because a child does not yet recognize the power of sight, as we will discuss. To him, sight is not that convincing. When he tests something in his mouth, that becomes real. To him, sight is, because his sight, obviously, that shows that sight is not just a physical experience. Like you see it, you see the object. There's something more to sight. And in fact, we pointed out many times the very special phenomenon, experience of sight, that it is different than all other senses. Every other sense, we know the object by being in contact with it. When we touch, so our hand is touching the object. When we taste, our mouth is tasting it. When we smell it in our nose. When we hear, it goes into our ear. It's actually affecting us, it's touching us. Sight brings the reality of the world to us without being in contact, from a complete distance. We can see things miles and miles away. The sun is very real to us. It's 93 million miles away from us. We can't even surmise the distance. What's in sight? And in addition to this passage, Moshe Rabbeinu says, I'm going to talk to you and you will see. How can you see because of talking? Obviously, the faculty of sight is not just a physical experience. There are several ways to explain it. I'm going to approach it on the basis of a halacha. And maybe we'll develop from that. There's a halacha that a kotan, a child, if he walks in the street and he picks something up, an object was lost, he picks it up, so halachically, strict halacha, the object does not become his. He cannot what's called bikoine, he cannot acquire an object from hefker, from no man's land. The reason is, of course, there's also the halacha that you're not allowed to take it away from him because you will upset the peace. But in strict halachic terms, it doesn't belong to him. He doesn't own it. And the reason for that is because he doesn't have das. He doesn't have, his intellect is not fully developed so that he appreciates the meaning of acquisition, of ownership. And I will explain it as we go along. However, there is an exception to that. The exception is that if somebody gives him an object, not he found an object in Hefker, but somebody gives him an object. Somebody gives him an object, then he can acquire it, and it becomes fully his.
Even the cotton?
Well, even a cotton, it becomes fully his. What's the difference? To explain it, the concept, the meaning of owning, of acquisition, acquisition means the following. This object is part of the world. It can belong to anyone. Then I take it, and I say this part of the world is mine, and it doesn't, and this excludes everybody else. A cotton, a child, cannot think in terms of the world, and that this part of the world belongs to him and excludes everybody else. He doesn't know that whole concept. He knows he likes this toy. So he's looking at this toy. He's not excluding anybody. There's nobody in his world. There's only him. But if somebody else gives it to him, so then this other person has automatically told the child, you see, this is mine, and now I'm making it yours. So the child then sees that this becomes his to exclusion of the other person. Then he understands that it becomes his truly. This is called in halacha das acheres makne. Das acheres makne means someone else's das, someone else's mind is giving it to him, and that makes it his. In other words, owning something is not just, it's in my pocket. Owning means that I appreciate the principle that this actually is part of the whole world, and this part of the world belongs to me to the exclusion of everybody else. Now let us examine the sense of sight in comparison, in contrast to the sense of touch. When I touch something, I know that it's there because it affects me. Not because it's part of the world, because it affects me. I have to walk through here, and the table is in my way, so I know the table is there. This is like a child knowing something because it's something that interests him. In sight, since I'm not even touching it, so how do I know the object exists? Because I see the object coming from the world. It's part of the whole world. It's part of the reality of the whole world. So then the object is known to me not just because I know it because of my interest in it, but because I see it being part of the whole world. Do I have you with me? Do you follow this? This means that the experience of sight is not just my personal experience. The experience of sight is when you realize a greater reality, a greater truth, and you see from the perspective of this greater truth a certain phenomenon, that becomes sight. If you don't have a greater truth, you only have yourself, then sight doesn't exist. It's not a real experience of sight. Like a child also sees, but it's not real. And for the child to experience that this is real, he has to taste it in his mouth. Otherwise, it's not real. this explains to us how it is possible that we can speak about something and explain something, and then say, do you see it? Even though we only said words. And yet, you can see the truth, you can see the reality of it. This is an extremely important aspect of a human being in general, and a Yid in particular, and a Yid in relation to Hashem, to the Meibashin, and to Torah, beyond that. Because the truest reality that a person has in his mind, what makes things real to a person, it's not what he sees, it's not what he experiences, it is what he believes. What's deep down in his emunah, this is the reality. The reason that we believe things existing and we can relate to the real world is because we believe that there is such a thing. It's all it's in the soul. Sight, even though it's a physical experience, but it's not really a physical experience. This is why in Hasidus, sight is related to the faculty of Chokhmah. Chokhmah is also called, Chokhmah is an intellectual experience that's called sight. Chokhmah is an ear. Okay, so now that we have this, we'll come into the Pasha and see what Moshe Rabbeinu is showing us. And what does it say? What does it say? Onoichi noisin lifneichem hayoim brocha uklol. I am placing in front of you today a blessing and God forbid, and a curse. There's a sikha where the Rebbe discusses this pasha, this posuk, and other parts of this pasha. And the Rebbe says an interesting thing. He says that the Targum, you know, the Targum, we all know Targum Unkelis, we say Targum, Shnai Nika Vecha Targum. Targum is a translation into Aramaic of the Torah. We know there are actually three Targumim, three different Targums, translations, Aramaic translation of the Chumash. There's Targum Unkelis, which is the most popular, which we all know about. Then there's Targum Yonasan ben Uzziel, Targum Yonasan ben Uzziel, Yonasan. In the Bigel Chumoshim, it's also printed there. And Targum Yerushalmi. There's a big difference between these two Targumim. Targum Unkelis is almost a word-for-word translation of the Chumash. Targum Yonasan, Targum Yerushalmi, is not just a translation, but it elaborates, and they bring a lot of medrashim, a lot of hidden things. And sometimes with one word, there's a whole, one word difference is a whole an inference, a hint on something completely different. So on this posuk, the Targum Unkelis says simply brocha uklolo, a brocha and a klola in the Aramaic word levataya. The Aramaic word levataya is a klola. Targum Yonason says a brocha and chilufei. Chilufei means the substitute for the bracha. Chilufei.
Substitute for the bracha?
Huh?
Substitute for the bracha?
Yeah, a bracha, and instead of klolo, in Botai he says chilufei.
It's like a nicer way of saying it?
No, that's what it says chilufei. Chilufei means, the word chiluf. Chiluf means instead.
Oh,
A substitute. That's what the Targum says. An interesting thing. So you would think the Targum does not want to use the word klola, like a curse, so he uses a nicer word. So even if that were the case, he can't use a nicer word that is simply doesn't fit. He could say it's opposite, bracha and the opposite, but chilufi does not mean the opposite, it means the substitute. And another further interesting thing, that the following psukim after that, it says, as habrocha asher tishmu, the bracha will come if you listen to Hashem, to the words of the mitzvahs. V'hakloli im lo tishmu. The kloli is if you don't listen. Over there, he translates the word kloli levotayo, just like Targum Unkelis. So he does use the word levotayo. And here he says, chilufi. Chilufi means substitute. So we will discuss this sikha, and then afterwards we'll come. This is an extremely rich sikha, and how many pieces, parts of it that I will bring in, and then we will discuss the Indian. The Rabbi asks, chilufi, a substitute. We know, for instance, in letters of the alphabet, that we have oisias that have chilufim. I'm sure you learned that you can substitute for letters. And the reason you can substitute letters is because these letters have some natural relationship to one another. Like Aleph, Hey, Ches, and Ayin have a natural relationship. Beis, Pei, Mem have a natural relationship because they all come from the same source in the mouth. Like it says that Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and then say Baruch Shem K'nachusel Le'olam Voed. So void, it says void is the word echod. B'chilufei yasva. Void is also the word echod, except the letters were grammatically, by grammatical rules, substituted. How were they substituted? The vav substitutes for the aleph, because there is a klal, void, ahavi, aleph, hey, vav, yud, are soundless letters at the end of a word, and they have certain rules. So therefore the vav can be substituted for the aleph. Then the ayin, vav, substitutes for the ches, because ayin and the ches both come from the gorin, both come from the throat, and they substitute for the other. And daled, of course, is daled. So this is how you substitute letters. So these substitutions make sense because there's a correlationship. But bracha and klola, how can klola be a substitute for bracha? It's the opposite. Okay? So first the Rebbe says, at first glance, that this concept of the klola being a substitute for the bracha means that Hashem actually gives, He sends down bracha. But people here in this world, they pervert. What pervert means? They contaminate, they render impure the bracha, and it becomes a klol. Hashem sends him a bracha, and they misuse it and it becomes a klol. Like the moshel, this is my own addition just to explain the inyan. The moshel of a father giving his son a treasure, and the son takes the treasure and he squanders it and uses it for bad things. So the father gave him a good thing, but he made from the good thing a bad thing. And therefore, according to this, it would mean that Hashem actually gives us good things. But we, if there is any klolos, any bad things coming out of it, it's because of our own deeds. And then the Rebbe says that does not fully explain the pasuk, because the pasuk says, "Onoichi noisen lifnechem hayim." I am giving to you, which means that it comes both the bracha and the klola comes from Hashem. So how come the Targum says that this is something which does not come from Hashem? How can it be said it doesn't come from Hashem? So for this the Rebbe explains that the real meaning of this Targum is that there are two types of brachas that Hashem gives us. There are brachas that are obvious and brachas that are not obvious, that are concealed. So inherently, internally, there are brachas, but superficially they look like the opposite, like clothes. And this is essentially the pshat in the pasuk the Rebbe explains. Onoichi, the word onoichi refers to Hashem. And this reference to Hashem, the word onoichi, is a very special reference. Normally we speak to Hashem either by the name, Hashem, Elokim, Adni, Shaddai. But when you refer to Hashem as onoichi, I, that refers to Hashem at the highest level. Like by Matan Torah, in the Aseres HaDibros it says, Onoichi Hashem Elokecha Asher Tzisicha. Onoichi. By Matan Torah, the Aseres HaDibros, the Torah comes from Onoichi. This is higher than any name.
It's higher than Havaya?
Higher than Havaya, yeah.
We can just go around saying Anochi as much as we want.
Yeah, because that's higher than becoming contaminated by misuse. It's the highest thing. So this is the point. This is what Moshe Rabbeinu says. You should recognize and see. We are in the world all kinds of different things. Things which are common as brachas, and then chas v'sholom things that come look like substitutes, opposites of brachas. But we have to understand and recognize that it all comes from Onoichi. It all comes from the highest level, from Hashem Himself. So that the opposite itself is not really an opposite, not really a klolo. This is only a brocha in a substituted way. A brocha coming in a hidden way. You know, the month of Av, this month that we're still finishing off, month of Av means father. The names of the months that we have, Tishrei, Cheshvan, all of these names, these are not from the Torah. These names were given the months later on in Golus, as a matter of fact. The Yidden were in Golus from Bavel. They got these months. It's an interesting thing that in Arabic, Tammuz is also Tammuz. It's like our name Tammuz. I don't know if they still remain exactly the same name, but in Arabic, because the names of the months really originated from Bavel. I remember there was a nuclear reactor in Iraq, if I don't forget, I'm not mistaken. A nuclear reactor, a power plant that was producing nuclear energy, that they could produce a bomb. Nuclear, you know what nuclear means? Atomic. And the Israelis, this was going many years ago. The Israelis, the Yidden, they went down there inside Iraq then. I think it was in Iraq, and they lifted up the whole reactor and took it away. The Israelis, because they were writing about this, and they said the name of this reactor, the Arabs called this reactor 17 Tammuz. That was the name of this reactor.
In Iraq?
Huh?
Iraq?
Yeah, I think it was in Iraq, if I'm not mistaken.
Which was destroyed, yes?
Huh?
Reactor which was destroyed, yes? Destroyed by
In Israel. 17 Tammuz. I remember myself then that there was President Reagan. President Reagan was a decent man, but he was unhappy with the Israeli that Israeli went into Iraq. You know, he said it, but he meant it or not. But he said he kind of complained. So I myself wrote to him, look, you know, the 17 Tammuz, you know what 17 Tammuz stands for? 17 Tammuz stands for the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. That's why they call it 17 Tammuz. Anyway, so the names of the months are things that we got from Babel, from Golus. So it's an interesting thing. Babel came after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, which means Babel came after Tisha B'Av, after Shivas B'Tammuz, and after Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is the day of destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and yet this month, when Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, we called Av, Father. How can you call the month that destroyed the Beis Hamikdash with the name Father? And the explanation is that, in fact, No one cares about the son, the child, to punish him as much as the father. Everybody else, a teacher, if the child misbehaves, so he tries his best to make him behave. Tries his best that he should listen and do his homework and all that. The last resort, what happens if the child misbehaves? What does the teacher do? He sends him out of class. Okay, you don't belong here. He sends him out of class because he's not his father. He doesn't really have a relationship with him. Listen, I'll try my best. You don't want to learn? Go. Who would be the one who would stand with his child and do everything and never let go until he will correct him? Only the father. Even if it comes to punishment and then a severe punishment, until he will get the child to turn away. No one, as a matter of fact, even has the right to punish, to cooperate with punishment, except the father. So that when you see such punishment that Hashem gave the Jewish people, you know that this is not punishment. This is a relentless, what relentless means, without stop, effort to keep the Eden attached to Hashem. And this is what the Targum says, that these curses are not curses for punishment purpose. They're not bad. This is still the bracha. Bracha means that Hashem is still blessing us. Hashem still wants to be with us. He wants us to be with Him. But there are different, under certain circumstances, it comes in different ways. In order to keep us with Him. Okay? This is just a little touch of the Sikha. There's a long Sikha after that. It talks about the Haftarahs and all that, which I don't know if I want to go into this right now. But what I do want is to elaborate and discuss this principle which we just now mentioned. You know, the Torah contains 613 mitzvahs. Among the 613 mitzvahs, you will find qualities that are completely opposite one the other. Totally opposite. You will find mitzvahs that seem to be expressing mercy and compassion. But then you find mitzvahs that express the opposite. The person is Machal Shabbos, he gets killed. Literally. Machal Shabbos, he gets killed. On the other hand, the Torah says that to save a Jewish life, nothing stops, nothing should stop. There's nothing more precious than saving a Jewish life, than saving a life. You can go and be Mechalel Shabbos to save a life. But if a person was Mechalel Shabbos, he gets killed. Do you see the irony? this phenomenon that we have in the Torah, a complete view of existence, a complete view of the world, completely opposite ends, totally different paths, so that no one can possibly encapsulate. Encapsulate means analyze the Torah in one idea, in one philosophy. It's not a single philosophy. There are 613 mitzvahs. There are 613 philosophies. Each mitzvah is a standalone need. Even though there is a relationship and there's opposites. As a matter of fact, the Gemara says that a person should never say that Hashem's mitzvahs are expressing compassion. Hashem does not, Eden do not do the mitzvahs because Hashem is expressing compassion.
Chemla.
Chemla, right. Chemla. Rachmanut. We do mitzvahs because Hashem commanded us to do the mitzvahs. Because the mitzvahs in the Torah come directly from Hashem. Onoichi, who is totally above any kind of emotional influence. It's expressing the godly truth. And the godly truth is totally unlimited. It can incorporate totally opposite concepts. Totally opposite concepts. And these opposite concepts, this illustrates, this shows how the Torah is really higher and above the world. Something that from the worldly perspective would be a curse, from the Torah perspective, it's a blessing. It's a blessing in disguise. And this is the principle that Moshe Rabbeinu is telling us. He says that, hey, I want you to think and see. By understanding it, you will see that the Torah which I'm giving you is not a Torah that can be analyzed and understood with human philosophy, with human logic. It cannot possibly be explained from a limited perspective. There's not one pathway, there's 613 different paths in the Torah. Who can coordinate all of these paths and unite all of them? Only Hashem. Onoichi. So that when we do a mitzvah, when we learn Torah, when we do a mitzvah, when we pursue a Torah life, the principle behind that is not, this is a nice, compassionate, warm life. This is pleasant. Of course, all of these things come with it. But that is not what we are focused on. This is not what makes this life a bracha, a blessing. What makes this life a blessing? The central point that it all comes from Oiche, from Hashem. Our connection to Hashem, this is the source, this is the primary meaning of our lives. This is why we can incorporate in our lives opposite things completely. and they are entirely in congruence with one another. In congruence, they balance together. The Mishnah says, Kol ha'omer, ein li elo Torah. Someone says, I only have Torah. I'm only interested in Torah. Not interested in anything else, just in Torah. Torah is the greatest thing. He wants to dedicate himself to Torah exclusively. Right? It's wonderful. So then the Gemara says, Afilu Torah ein lo. He doesn't even have Torah. If he says, I only know Torah, I don't need anything else, I don't know about mitzvahs, I don't know about chasodim, to do favors, it's not my business. Somebody needs a loan, let him go to somebody else. I'm busy learning Torah. Afilu Torah ein lo. He doesn't even have Torah. Why is it he doesn't have Torah? He does have Torah. He learns Torah. He doesn't have Gimos Chasodim. Why does it say that he doesn't have Torah? Good question, right? I feel he doesn't have Torah. The answer is, the reason that we say that he doesn't even have Torah is because he does not have the truth of Torah. He thinks that Torah is that which he can understand. If his Torah is that which he can understand, that's not Torah. Torah is Hashem's Torah. And when he learns Hashem's Torah, then automatically he will incorporate other things too. Actually, this you learned in Tanya, for those who say the Yechitas. In recent days, the Tanya quotes this Gemara. Afilu Torah ein lo. That's not called Torah. Torah is Torah's Hashem, Hashem's Torah. And if it's Hashem's Torah, then it incorporates everything. Then it's not just scholarship, it's not philosophy, it's not good deeds, it's everything. It's the whole world. When we start speaking about the whole world, and everything together, this is when it begins to become so real, like we see it with our eyes. That's what it's called re'eh, see. When you talk about one thing or another thing, then each thing has its own qualities. This is compassion, this is scholarship, this is smart, this is stupid. Everything has its own definition. When is it that it relates to sight, like we said before? That what is sight? Sight means that you see it as part of the whole truth. That's what sight means. The experience of sight is that it's not something that you see by itself, like touch. You see this one table, you touch this one table. Sight is when you see the entire truth and everything as part of the whole truth. When does that come to focus? When you begin to experience, to see, oh yeah, I really see it. When you realize that you're talking about something that encompasses everything. Contains everything. And even, God forbid, if there is punishment, you know that this punishment, God forbid, is not really punishment. It's a punishment that is inherently, deep down, it is a brach. Because this punishment, like a father punishing the son, doesn't let the son to drown in his own dirt and to fall away. When we begin to contemplate, to reflect on the totality of Torah, totality of Hashem's relationship to the world, then we can begin to see it, re'eh. And it's not anything that we define by one type of activity, one type of thing. Wherever you turn, it is a truth that is universal. It includes everything. And then when it includes everything, then everything in it becomes really true. Like we said before, that what is sight? Sight is when every little thing that you see, you recognize that that's part of the whole truth. Then you see it. Then it's a sight. If you know the thing by itself, not as part of the whole thing, it's not really true. It's not reality. It's just this particular thing. So, coming back to ourselves over here, we can all wake up now. And those who were awake till now can stay awake. That's for sure. We have to recognize and reflect to ourselves from time to time. I pointed out in the past, we spoke about Shema Yisrael. When we say Shema Yisrael, we close our eyes. And what do we think when we say Shema Yisrael? You probably heard it from me 10 times. What do we think Shema Yisrael? Hashem Echad, that Hashem is one in the entire world, up and down in all four sides. And we say it with closed eyes. Why do we say it with closed eyes? Because the entire truth that we're referring to is that which we know inside our mind, inside ourselves, not what we see with our eyes at this particular moment, this thing and that thing. It is the entire existence which is true to us when we close our eyes. We have to rise up, and we have to be able to see existence, to see the truth, to see the world, to see reality with closed eyes. Then, if we see it with closed eyes, then when we open our eyes, that which we see becomes part of the reality, part of the truth. So when we say Hashem Echad with closed eyes, when we open our eyes, we can then explain ourselves that this, what we see with open eyes, this is part of Hashem's creation. Because it's part of that overall truth that I saw with closed eyes.
The person close the eyes, what is contemplation or the remember?
No, neither one. It's not contemplation, not remember. When you close your eyes, there is something. See, we're not used to it, but there is something that we recognize with closed eyes. We know that we exist, and we know that everything exists with closed eyes. We don't need to be proven that something exists. If we need to be proven that something exists by seeing it, then we are blind. That's not sight. Sight is when we know it with closed eyes. Well, but from the fact that we live and we experience life, that we know with closed eyes. That's the real reality that we know. This is what we know, what our neshama, our soul, tells us. It's not something which we have to experience to be told by the physical world. And it is important to understand, when we experience and we delve down into into this sight, to seeing this truth, then we have touched our neshama, touched our soul. And then, wherever we go, and whatever confronts us, whatever challenges we face, we always know that it is all from the same Hashem. It is Brocho and Klolo, all coming from Hashem. It's all the same, one truth. And this is opposite than this. He incorporates everything. And then we can relate to that way. And this is what the Pasuk says, Re'ei. You should see that Onoichi Hashem himself is giving to us, to you, everything. That way, you will never get lost. That way, you will be able to. What is this, a kindergarten over here? That way you will be able to recognize and to follow in every direction that you need to go. Sometimes you have to be compassionate, sometimes you have to be strict. And you have to do everything. Because you're always expressing the truth of the godly truth. And the godly truth includes everything. This principle is the real principle of life. This is both. It gives us a way to live in the world, but more importantly, it gives us a real experience what to live means. To live does not mean that I can taste my food and I can feel pain when I eat the table. To live means that I feel life. I know a truth with closed eyes. That's to live. That's the life of the neshama. And that we can literally see because it comes from an all-encompassing truth. Just like we explained, that physical side is also not because I see the physical object, but because I see the entire truth. We are now coming close to Elul, which is the month. It's called Chodesh HaRachamim, the month of compassion. It is the month that everyone has the opportunity to reflect and wake himself up, to reflect and rise up and come closer to Hashem, to break through one's own limitations and to actually come closer and to relate to Hashem in the real sense. Hashem should help each one of us that we should have a good, successful month of Elul, so that we come into Tishrei, into Rosh Hashanah, in Kippur, with great joy, with great assuredness. We will certainly merit and get Hashem to accept the coronation. That's what Rosh Hashanah is. It's a coronation of Hashem.
What is it?
Coronation, make him king, put a crown on him. And we will all be blessed with a good year. It's a successful year, each one in their way. And ultimately, the success of Klal Yisrael, that we will come out of the Golus of Mashiach.